What happens when someone pushes you to the edge, breaks you down piece by piece, and the moment you finally walk away, they tell the world you just disappeared? They don't mention the abuse, the sabotage, the emotional exhaustion, the cheating, the lies, the gaslighting, the way they shattered your nervous system, then blamed you for shaking. They just say, I did everything for her, and she just left. She just up and left. But you know the truth. You didn't just leave. You escaped. Because if you stayed any longer, you would have lost your mind, your voice, or your soul. They didn't survive you. They set you up. And now they're wearing your collapse like it's their breakthrough. Let me ask you something real. Why do abusers get to tell the story when they were the reason you had to choose survival over sanity? They don't tell people how they cornered you emotionally, how they sabotaged your peace with silence and surveillance, how they cheated, lied, manipulated, then handed you the shame like it was yours to carry. They don't mention how enmeshed they were with their family, how emotionally stunted, how spiritually bankrupt, how they tried to make you smaller because they couldn't rise with you. So when you finally left, not because you wanted to, because you had to, they ran with the narrative that made them the victim. Suddenly, you're the abandoner. You're the ungrateful one. You're the unstable one. And now they're retelling your trauma like it's their testimony, performing healing they never earned, building platforms with the pain they caused, running the city off your name. This isn't a breakup. This is a setup turned smear campaign. And tonight, we're not just correcting the record. We're reclaiming the truth. And we're definitely not defending our name. We're resurrecting it. The pre-written lie, when they script the story before they sabotage you. The smear campaign doesn't start after you leave. It starts the moment you begin to wake up. Before the breakup, before the silence, before you even realize what's happening, they are already planting seeds. They make quiet comments to friends like, she's been acting differently lately. I'm really concerned about her mental health. I just don't know how much more I can take. She's saying she's spiritual and she has dreams. But they don't say what they did. They don't talk about the cheating, the gaslighting, the emotional terrorism. They don't talk about the way they turned their family into flying monkeys, the way they sabotaged your career, the way they chipped away at your confidence until you started questioning if you were the problem. They don't talk about intimate conversations that were repeated and made public with their own mother. They just make sure that when you finally leave, people are already primed to believe them. So when you start telling the truth, you sound like the angry one, the bitter one, the dramatic one. And they get to stand there, polished and pitiful, pretending they did everything they could. Let's be clear. They didn't just mistreat you. They manufactured your exit so they could control the aftermath. They couldn't stop you from leaving, but they could rewrite the story before you had a chance to open your mouth. So when people say, "Oh, wow, you left out of nowhere. Oh, wow, I can't believe she did that. Oh, wow, how ungrateful." Remember this. You didn't just leave. You were pushed out. And then painted as a villain for choosing yourself. The smear campaign strategy. They say, "She just left." But what they leave out is this. There was one therapy session. You gave it a chance. You sat there while he lied with the same face he wore in your home. Charming, controlled, just convincing enough. And the therapist didn't see through it, didn't see you, didn't feel the spiritual fracture you were carrying. And right then, you knew. God provides. And this wasn't it. You didn't need 6 more months of explaining. You didn't need another copay to confirm what your spirit already knew. Because look at your body. Look at your voice. Look at the pain sitting in your shoulder, the nerve damage in your mouth, the way your voice has to fight to be heard clearly now. That's not mental illness. That's a memorial. Your body is a survivor's archive, and it never lied. So when they say, "She just left," what they meant was, you stopped waiting for a witness. You stopped asking for validation. You followed the God who didn't need a license to speak the truth. Because you weren't meant to stay in that house. You were meant to lead people out of it. Angels do not live in hell when heaven is their home. When abuse crosses into spiritual violation, some wounds don't show up on paperwork. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, but they live in your energy. What happened to you didn't end when the relationship ended. It followed you. It haunted you. It hunted you. Because when someone loses control of your body, they try to take hold of your name, your energy, your community, your future. This wasn't just emotional neglect. It was spiritual exploitation. It was psychological exile. They tried to paint you as the villain while feasting off your silence like it was a peace treaty. But the deeper truth, you were never theirs to control. And the moment you broke free, they felt their image start to collapse. So what did they do? They lashed out with distortion. They built platforms from pity. They whispered lies in rooms where your name used to be safe. But here's what they'll never understand. There is a spiritual cost to dragging someone's soul through the mud for the sake of your reputation. And whether or not they ever get held accountable by systems, your ancestors, your spiritual team, and the divine saw all of it. There is a reason your body still tenses when you hear certain names. There's a reason you get tired without explanation. There's a reason you feel yourself tightening before the truth even gets spoken. Because spiritual warfare leaves spiritual residue. But the moment you chose yourself, even with the nerve pain, even with the trauma, even with the silence, you started your own reversal. This is not about proving anything. It's about clearing your field. So let them run their mouth. Let them collect their likes. Let them call it healing. Because you're walking in something they'll never access again. Alignment. Spiritual retaliation. When they can't reach you, so they haunt the energy around you. There's a shift that happens when you stop explaining yourself. When you stop defending, stop justifying, stop bleeding for people who would have let you die quietly. That's when it hits. The calls, the tension, the sudden chaos for no reason, the spiritual fog that wraps itself around your progress. Because when they can't reach you physically, they start pulling at your energy. They start planting seeds of doubt in people around you. They start performing peace while sending out warfare. It's not random. It's retaliation. You broke the contract. You stopped feeding the illusion. You stopped bowing to their emotional demands. And they felt the collapse in their spirit before the phone even went silent. So when they try to curse what they can no longer control, they gossip, they post, they send confusion your way. They align with people who secretly hope you never rise and call it healing, call it justice, call it karma. But what they don't know is this. Your silence isn't a weakness, it's a spell. Every time you choose not to engage, not to match their chaos, not to send back what they're throwing, you're giving your spiritual team full clearance to handle it without mercy. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to defend your name in every room, because spiritual retaliation is loud, but divine protection is louder. And baby, your name is wrapped in prayer and clarity, in boundaries sealed in blood and tears and wisdom. Let them talk. Let them plot. Let them plan, because you're already covered. Reclaiming your name with truth, without permission. You didn't leave the relationship. You escaped the scene of a spiritual crime. Let's be honest. If someone really loved you, they wouldn't have pushed you to the brink just to see if you still stay. There were no mixtapes, no apologies, no standing in the rain begging you to come back. No effort. Just a silent exit and a story they started spinning before the door even closed. And you weren't chasing a fantasy. You were chasing your sanity. So when people ask you why you left, just tell them, I left because my nervous system was shutting down. I left because I was being erased while still breathing. I left because even God said now. There was one therapy session, and he lied so well, even a therapist couldn't see you. That was the sign. You didn't need 6 more weeks of explaining. You needed oxygen. So you told the truth with your exit. God provides, and you are not God. And you walked. But not without wounds. A shoulder that still aches. Nerve damage in your mouth from being hit after surgery. A voice that has to move carefully just to sound clear. A cadence you never asked for just so the world can understand words that were always true. You don't reclaim your name with hashtags and filters. You reclaim it by choosing yourself again and again and again, even while your body remembers what your spirit survived. That's not just bravery, that's rebirth. The empire they built was off your pain, but they never paid the cost. They say you just left. They say you walked out because you were unstable, ungrateful, or chasing fairy tales. But here's the truth. You didn't walk out. You ran. You ran because you were being hunted. Your body knew before your mind could catch up. You were having panic attacks that made it impossible to stand. Bent forward, clutching your stomach, lungs gasping for breath you couldn't reach. And what did he do? Nothing. No comfort, no help. He closed you in a room by yourself, sealed your breakdown in silence like it was your punishment for feeling too much. And at night, your spirit couldn't rest. Your eyes popped open every time he moved. Every breath near you made your heart slam in your chest. You weren't sleeping. You were surviving with your eyes closed. And then came the 4 a.m. disappearances. Always a reason, always a purpose, always a mission. But your spirit knew the difference between calling and cover-up. The timing was too convenient. The distance grew too quiet and the intimacy gone. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You were confused. You were being emotionally evicted in slow motion. And every excuse, every disappearing act dressed in divine language was just another form of spiritual gaslighting. Not dreams, distractions. Not purpose, avoidance. So when you finally got out, barely holding your voice, barely carrying your body, they spun the story. She just left. She was never satisfied. I provided everything. But here's what they never paid. The cost of your pain. The cost of your peace. The cost of living with nerve damage, spiritual damage, and scars no one ever apologized for. They tried to build an empire off your silence. Tried to play survivor with the blood they drew. But guess what? You are not the villain. You are the one who got away. And they never paid the cost of what they did to get you to break. Betrayal dressed like help when shelter isn't safe. Not every safe house is safe. Not every offer of help is honest. Sometimes what looks like sanctuary is just another setup with softer lighting. You escaped the main fire, but you could still smell the smoke in the next room. You weren't being held, you were being watched, measured, misunderstood. People you once called friend began to repeat stories they didn't verify. They didn't ask you what happened. They decided. They turned. And when the tension got too thick, you were asked to leave with a sweet story and a manufactured reason that felt more like script than sincerity, not to mention the timing. It wasn't being said aloud, but your spirit already knew. You were no longer welcome. You weren't offered rest. You were handed suspicion. You weren't being comforted. You were being pushed towards collapse in a place you thought was safe. Another door, another exile, another heartbreak disguised as housing. Even support came with strange energy, blurry boundaries, questions that felt more invasive than caring. Comfort that came with a cost. You weren't exploring, you weren't confused. You were just trying to be left alone long enough to survive. So you did what survivors do. You made a sacred space in the smallest room, the floor, the corner, the closet. Because even if it didn't make sense to them, it felt safe enough for your soul to breathe. And when you were asked to leave again, you didn't beg, didn't explain, you didn't break. You packed your things and walked away with your peace intact. Because now you understood some doors close for your protection. Some friendships end to stop the bleeding. And even betrayal carries purpose when it's part of your escape route. The resurrection after the exile. You didn't just leave, you returned to yourself. There's a strange silence that comes when the last door closes behind you. It's not peace right away. It's ache. It's shock. It's the weight of having nowhere to go but back into yourself. But even then, even in the nothingness, something starts to stir. Not hope, not joy, not yet, but space. Space where manipulation used to live. Space where fear used to sleep beside you. Space where your name was no longer on trial every time you exhaled. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was resurrection. You weren't trying to get back to who you used to be. She was gone. And honestly, she needed to be. The version of you who tolerated it to feel love, she's not leading anymore. That version of you shrank to stay safe. She's resting now. The version of you who walked away without a place to land still had the nerve to say, I will not go back, not to him, not to them, not to the lie, not even the version of me who thought this was love. And that's resurrection. That's the miracle. That's the moment where the girl they discarded becomes the woman they can't access anymore. Not because you're hiding, but because you're home now. Inside yourself, inside your truth, inside a spirit they couldn't break, no matter how many times they tried to rename your story. You just didn't walk away. You returned to the truth, to God, to your body, to your name. And when you finally got there, you didn't flinch. And when you looked in the mirror again, you didn't flinch. You didn't apologize. You didn't beg to be understood. You said, this is me. Not the version they needed me to be. Not the story they wrote, but the one God preserved. You return to yourself fully, finally, and this time, you're not leaving again. The reckoning, not for revenge, but for resurrection. They never expected you to survive. Because when you were breaking, they were branding. When you were bleeding, they were building platforms off your silence. You've been in the wilderness long enough to know that healing doesn't come with revenge. It comes with resurrection. And what they didn't know is that while they were laughing, you were rebuilding. While they were lying, you were waking up. And now, they don't get access. Not to your voice, not to your energy, not to your softness, not to your throne. This is not about destroying them. It's about protecting what God resurrected in you. So let them whisper, let them watch, let them wonder how you survive what they swore would finish you. Because when you tell the story again, make sure they include this part. She came back different, not bitter, not broken, just sovereign. They built an empire from your pain. Wore your suffering like a crown. Turn your story into currency. Told the world they survived you, but left out the part where they orchestrated your collapse. They never healed. They just branded the wound. Put gold trim on the mask and call it growth. A venture, if you will. But what they built was never holy, because an empire built on betrayal has a shelf life. And what they thought would last forever is starting to rot at the foundation. Because this isn't Rome. And you are not their fallen soldier. You are the storm they never prepared for. You're not here to destroy them. You're here to reclaim everything they tried to build without permission. So let the towers fall. Let the stories unravel. Let the ones who clap for your exile learn your name again with reverence. Because what they tried to use against you is exactly what will crown you. Before we close, let's return to ourselves fully. Take a breath. And on the exhale, release what was never yours to carry. Now gently speak within or aloud. I call my energy back. From every space, seen and unseen, where it was leaked, pulled, or misused. From every word spoken over me without truth or love. From every interaction where I dim my spirit to be safe. From every agreement, known or unknown, that drain my power without consent. I call it back whole. I call it back blessed. I call it back cleansed in divine light. I seal my field with truth. I close every open gate with love. I stand in what is mine. I call my energy back to me. You can do this often. You are allowed to reset your energy as many times as needed. This is not performance. This is spiritual hygiene. Because word curses are real. Energy harvesting is real. But your power, your voice, your protection is more real. Breathe again. Exhale. You are home now. This is Empowered Shadows. Thank you for listening.